self-care, charity to yourself is the best way to be prepared to care for others, to show charity.
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudewa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Chief Marketing Officer. Our goal is to equip teachers and teaching parents with methods and materials which will aid them in training their students to become confident and competent communicators and thinkers. So, Andrew, I didn't want to wait too long to have this follow-up conversation with you. Last week, we talked about 2 of the 3 points, culture and curriculum. The third one was care. And I want to be sure that we talk about this so that our families and teachers feel cared for by us, because we really do care. When I want to talk about culture just for a second at IEW. We talked about corporate culture last week, and one of the things you said is that that's something that we can control more than we can control necessarily the culture at large. Well, one of the things that I like to think that we're exceptionally good at is our customer service is very good. We want to be sure that we care for each and every teacher, for each and every parent that calls. Yeah. And honestly, it's a reflection of you, because we know that you care so much about people and you want to make sure everybody's happy.
Well, and to do that, we have, I would say, a fairly extensive training program.
Yes, we do.
We don't just hire warm bodies and say, here, read from a script.
No.
It's like we really want deep level understanding.
Yeah.
We do have kind of a general policy, no question, no matter how tedious, goes unanswered.
Right. Yep.
And then if someone has a concern or a frustration, I think your expression is give them the pickle, right?
Right.
Do whatever it takes to be sure that someone is cared for and has the best possible chance of using what we can offer for their enrichment and success in teaching.
Yes, and what you just said right now reminds me just of a quick story, if I could just share with you and all of our listeners.
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring, on that theme of caring. Our customer service team is not just transactional. People call and say, help me decide what I should purchase. And, through a series of questions, they'll give answers. And sometimes our customers think that they want something different than what's being recommended to them.
Right.
And it's because of what you just said. We want our customers to have the best opportunity for success. And these essentially educational consultants are well trained, and they know this is going to work in this situation. And this really hard class that's intended for a high school student who has been doing IEW for 3 or 4 years is probably not going to work for your middle school student. So please don't buy that. And, if anything, that's where we get in trouble for is, well, I really wanted to buy this and you won't let me buy it. Well, there's nothing preventing you from buying it. Here's the link. But we also have this really cool thing called a 100% lifetime guarantee.
Right.
When people buy things from us and they're dissatisfied, they can return it, and that also is caring.
Yeah. Well, the word care in Latin, carus, is similar, although not necessarily cognate, not from the same root, to the word caritas, meaning charity.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's not directly connectable linguistically, certainly there is, a conceptual relationship because when you're caring for others, you're showing charity. When you're caring for yourself, you're showing charity. You're loving others and loving yourself in that giving way. And, I think almost every person alive would agree that it's important to learn how to care for others and care for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that charity is a de facto good thing in the world.
Indeed.
So then, the question is how to do that best.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that every family and every teacher and every supervisor and really everybody has to ask themselves, in my sphere of influence, where are the priorities in terms of caring? And, I think we could address a little bit of this in the time we have.
Okay.
And while it's tempting to say, well, let's start with how do we care for other people, I would argue that it's very hard to be selfless, to be caring, to be giving, to kind of have a great flow of charity if you don't have that inside and if you aren't, healthy emotionally,
Right.
mentally, physically, spiritually. If you're not full, how can you give?
It reminds me of that, you've flown way more than me, but I've certainly heard every time we get on that flight,
Yeah.
if the mask drops from the ceiling after you're done screaming,
Right.
put yours on first and then help others.
Yes.
So it's kind of that idea, right?
And then help the kid next to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And now they're saying be sure you remove your mask.
You
before-
remove your mask before you put on the oxygen mask. Well, in a time of panic, sometimes you need very step-by-step guidance.
Tis
there.
true.
In Oliver DeMille's work, he has the 7 keys of great teaching, which I have embraced and talked about and shared. And I don't agree with everything he says, but then again, I don't agree with everything anybody says, really.
Right.
But one of them is teaching is about you, not them. That really great teaching is about your condition, not the students. And we tend to be very reactive as parents, as a society. We say, oh no, we have kids. We better figure out how to teach them. And of course, that's reasonable. But I would juxtapose this against the vision that John Senior cast in a book he wrote that was never published called The Idea of a School. So it's not available. But in the beginning, he says, first and foremost, a school is a faculty of friends. And through their engagement, engaging with, the good and great books and beauty and truth and all that, they attract students. So by the principle of attraction. But when you think about it, first and foremost, a family is parents. And sadly, sometimes that breaks apart and it's still a family. But there is that shared vision of parents. How do we want this family to grow? Some people start thinking about it before they have kids, which is probably a wise thing to do. But certainly by the time you've got a kid and it's starting to grow up, you got to figure some stuff out. But I have known for a long time if I am, walk into a room of students, or if I engage my children, or if I have a violin student walk into my studio, if I am in good condition, the teaching goes very well. If I am not in good condition, maybe due to a lack of sleep or poor eating or bad time management or a lack of preparation, then the teaching just doesn't go so well. And one of the dangerously frustrating things about kids is they can quickly figure out, are you in good condition or not? And if you're not, well, they can just stomp all over you. And you end the class or you end the day exhausted and somewhat melancholy, thinking that was just not one of my better teaching days. And we can't avoid those entirely.
Right.
But I think we can minimize those days by adhering to that principle that self-care, charity to yourself, is the best way to be prepared to care for others, to show charity.
So, Andrew, today, June 2021, we occasionally get this question from our listeners or from those that see you on the homeschool convention. You've lost a lot of weight.
Yes, and
What are
sometimes
you up
it's
to?
followed up by, I hope it's intentional, because sometimes people get sick
Right.
and lose a lot of weight.
Yeah, but talk about the care that you have been more intentional about.
Well, it's really been a decade of change for me, and I'm not sure how long ago it was, but probably pushing 7 years, 7 years, when several people had mentioned a particular book, and we've talked about it before on the podcast, which is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And Walker.
Good
name, yeah. And, finally I thought, okay, all these people that I respect, basically, are telling me this book has value. I'll give it a shot. So I got the Audible, and I started listening to it. And it's one of those things where if someone said, hey, you know what, you need to have enough sleep in order to function well and be productive and happy, you'd be like, yeah, of course, I know that. And then just go about your business of sleeping 5 or 6 hours a day because you're so busy. And you got so many things you want to do, or you're distracted, or whatever. And then it often takes a greater depth of understanding to make a change. And for me, that's what this book did, is it just was hours and hours of research and analysis by a very, very articulate expert in the field. And it was just one of those kind of gradual shifts where I thought, I have been spending a very long time shorting myself on sleep, and I have paid the price. And I can't just make up for a decade of sleeping 5.5 hours a night just by catching up on the weekend.
Right.
Your brain doesn't work that way. And so I was convicted. I mean, it was a serious level mental, emotional, I would even say spiritual conviction that I need to reorder my life properly. But, I've talked to a lot of men, and, that decade, there's that decade where your kids are needing a lot of time and attention. You're working really hard because you're kind of at your peak in your career or profession. You want to be active in your church or community. You want to meet the needs of all your wife, and you are stretched very thin. And in many cases, the solution to doing more is to sleep less. I have talked to a lot of men. And I've also talked to a lot of women who don't sleep enough, but their excuse is really a much better one, which is, I have a baby that wakes up and it needs to be nursed and changed and that. And then just when I got that baby to sleep through the night, well, another one came along. So, women have that decade or so, plus or minus, in the same way. But, we can't necessarily solve all those problems, but we can elevate the priority of sleep. And, I finished that book and I thought, man, if I had read this book 10 years ago, I would be healthier. I would probably be happier. I would have been less likely to become melancholy or feeling hopeless about this thing or that thing. So many classes I've taught would have been better classes had I just reprioritized the time. And so I highly recommend the book. I don't agree with everything in the book. So if you listen or read this book and you say, how could Mr. Pudawa agree with that? I don't. But I am saying it changed my life for the better because I needed the depth of understanding to change my priorities.
Right. Yep.
And that's often the case. If you understand something, you can believe it. If you can believe it, you can change your actions. It's very hard to change yourself unless you believe in what you're trying to accomplish. So that was the first thing.
When we first met each other, back in the day, I think I was working for Biola University, and there was a conference that we were both at, and I had to pick up something early in the morning, and you were wearing a sweatshirt, and it looked like you had just gone out for a jog or something like that. And I commented on that. I said, were you working out? And you laughed. Ha, ha, ha. I never work out. I just think about that now, and now you're like, Julie, I don't know what we've got going on this afternoon, but I got to get to the gym.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Who are you?
Well, I mean, that was the third step. The second step,
second step
kind of led into that.
Okay.
And, I have lived, and I'm profoundly grateful, with a wife for a very long time who's been very attentive to the quality of food that we have in our home. And with some little dietary concerns with some of the children, we, over the years, kind of eliminated certain things that are just really not good for anyone, but specifically very not good for a couple of us. But I never had that, so it was kind of like, okay, when I'm home, I'll eat this really healthy diet, but when I'm on my own, I'll just eat whatever I want. If it's a pint of Haagen-Dazs or, hamburger and fries at the hotel restaurant, because it's cheaper than buying, more expensive, better food. But then I read this book that also had a profound effect on me called Eat to Beat Disease. William Lee, L-I, I believe, is the author. And I wasn't fighting a disease per se, but I've always had the idea that I would like to not get a serious disease.
Right.
And so this book kind of had appeal, and I just started listening to it. And again, it wasn't like there was anything earth-shakingly new in this book, but it was the complete understanding of foods and nutrients and how it affects the body by an MD, by a researcher who, and I respect research. I very much respect well-done scientific research that is presented clearly and has helpful or clarifying analysis with it. And so both of these books fell into that category. And that reading that book kind of corresponded with my children leaving home, my youngest children growing up and moving out. And then it's really different, isn't it, when you have no more kids to cook for? My wife became very much less interested in cooking.
Oh, right.
And then I became much more interested in controlling my own diet. And so from the beginning until the present, I moved from that phase of, I like to eat healthy, and I usually do, but to I really, at this point, don't eat anything unless I can define the positive effect it will have. So I don't just eat something because it's not bad. I won't eat something that is just not bad. I would rather eat nothing than to eat something that is just not bad. I only want to eat things that are actually very specifically good. And inside that is, my age, my metabolism, my blood type, my body type, my exercise level, my, calorie usage. I wasn't very interested in calories, though, I'll tell you. So I was eating really, really good food, but I was eating a lot of it. And my attitude about exercise, as you said, is, hey, I'm so busy. I run around working hard all the time anyway. And besides, I take a walk with my wife every now and then. So that's plenty of exercise. Well, that's a way to think. And then COVID hit. And I wasn't running around quite so crazy, and I had extra time. And
well, some people talked about, you've heard of the freshman 15, where freshmen, when they go off to college, they gain 15 pounds.
Yeah.
Just because they're not.
And there's the married 15, where you gain 15 pounds every decade. If you're lucky, only 15 pounds every decade.
Well, they were talking about the COVID-19, right? Adding on.
Yeah, well, for me, it turned out kind of differently. And I noticed, hitting about 60 years old, I don't have the same physical stamina that I had 20 years ago. Grandchildren get bigger, and I'm picking them up thinking, wow, this kid is heavy. Heavier than my children ever used to be at that age, and kind of just you think, okay, how important is this? And I think for me, to be just blatantly honest, I am a resistant person to change. I don't like change.
He speaks truth.
And sometimes God himself has to trick me into things. I mean, I was very tricked into moving to Oklahoma, Like, why would you ever move to Oklahoma? That was my idea, 13 years ago. Like, Oklahoma? Of all the horrible places on earth. And so, I visited here accidentally in the middle of the summer when it wasn't too hot, and accidentally in the middle of the winter when it wasn't too cold. And I thought, this is a pretty nice place. It's not so bad. And then I moved here, and bam, brutally hot summer, 98 degrees 24/7 for 3 weeks. So it was just a trick. I kind of had to get tricked into this exercise thing.
Okay.
So it was my son. He was kind of trying to figure out what to do, and he didn't want to go back to college yet, and he didn't really have a job he liked. And I said, look, you're good at 2 things. You're a fantastic teacher. You really are a good teacher. You're encouraging, you're patient, and I understand you don't want to teach an academic thing like writing, because he tried his hand at that and didn't like it. And you're also super buff, and you've been spending several years doing this, bodybuilding fitness thing, and you know all about it. So just put those together, become a personal trainer, and then you can work for a while in that field, and it'll be better for you. And he was kind of hem-haw, I have to study and take a test, blah, blah, blah. Okay, look, if you'll just do it, I will be your first client. I will go to the gym twice a week for 3 months. That was about all I was ever going to commit to. And he said, you'd never do that. Because all I have to do is badmouth gyms, and they're horrible places with obnoxious people and bad music, and they stink, and why would you go, and it's boring as heck. And so my attitude was, if you want to taste hell on earth, there's like a battlefield in Afghanistan or a gym. They're about equal in my view. Anyway. So he did it, and then I had to do this thing. It was like a year ago, January. And I tell you, it was so horrible. Oh, the first few times I was sore. It was just so painful and awful and miserable. But I kept my end of the bargain, and I went twice a week for 3 months. I missed a few because I was traveling during the beginning of the year, like January, February. I had a couple of short trips. So I made it up. But then the COVID hit, and there was nowhere to go and nothing to do. And I just thought, there is some advantage here. I am sore all the time, and I still don't like going, but I feel a little better. I feel a little stronger. I feel a little lighter. I feel a little more energy. So I just kept going, and then what happened? I don't know. He got busy, and so I went for the first time all by myself. Like, I don't even know if I know what to do. But then I thought, no, I do, because I've done this a dozen times. So I can use this machine or those weights or do this or that. Then the gym shut down for a while, I think 6 weeks. We were very fortunate here in Oklahoma. It wasn't a long, long shutdown. And they reopened, and I was paying the membership. And this gym, it's like it tricks you. They have one fee you have to pay every month, which is kind of expensive. But if you go at least 12 times a month, then your cost goes down.
Smart.
I guess it's smart and so I'm like, okay, if I go to the gym 3 times a week, I have to pay less. Okay, I could do that just to pay less, just the excuse. And then I don't know when it was. It was probably...
Well, and let me just say why that's smart. I'm marketing, right?
Right,
that
yeah.
is smart because now you are more invested. And if you're more invested, you're going to continue, which of course is exactly what happened to you, and you know that.
Yeah. And I hit this time. I don't remember. It was late in the year, maybe October, November. I was sitting in my office here. It was late afternoon, and I had this thought. The thing I most want to do right now is go to the gym. And then I heard myself think that, and I thought, that's not even me. I mean, that's a transformation of self. So I combined that, and I also got into the intermittent fasting because I was convinced of the long-term neurological benefits and health benefits. And so I started this plan of trying to eat all my food within 6 hours. And then I'm cooking for myself, everything. And gradually I'm just getting thinner and stronger, and I can see the results. And overall, since my peak, and I don't know quite when that was, to now, I actually lost 60 pounds.
Yep.
Which I would never have thought of myself as fat.
I never thought of you as fat, ever. And so when you started losing weight, it was almost like I didn't really notice until like one day. And it was probably close to that day that you said, I want to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Are you done with me? Because I need to go to the gym. I'm like, who are you?
Yeah.
And then, but so we'll have to, just in case our listeners don't know what you look like today, we'll post a before and after picture in our show notes, because that's actually on the front page of our website right now,
I guess
kind
so.
of innocuously, unintentionally, I should say.
You know, I look at pictures of myself, I think, wow, I really had a puffy face there for years.
Right.
But, for me, I'm in the last segment of life, fourth, third, however you want to count it, fifth, I don't know, eighth, who's to say. But I do know that I want to be able to serve my family, my coworkers, the education and homeschool community. I do want to be able to serve as best as I can for as long as I can.
Right.
And that's the desire of my heart. And so if that means these health things, sleeping, fasting, eating, exercising properly, as best as I can figure out, so that I can do the most good for those I love, then it's worth it. Whatever the added cost or discomfort there is, it's worth it because the goal, that's the greater goal.
Yep.
And so, when we look at charity, when we look at care, and we see the intersection between those, there's really just living the life that benefits you and others. And I want to read a little excerpt, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
It's from one of the great books. And I think, whether you are a Christian or not per se, whether you're a religious person or not per se, there's a truth embedded in this dialogue that applies to all of us. And it's from Brothers Karamazov, which some of our listeners have thought they should read, and some actually have read. But the famous character of Father Zosima in the Brothers Karamazov, he's talking to this woman who's struggling with her faith, right? And she says to him, "How can I retrieve my faith? According to what proofs?" So she's struggling with her faith. And what she's looking for is, I need more apologetics here, right? I need to be reinforced as to why I should continue to believe what I have been believing or want to believe, but I can't, right? And so, doubts assail. And Father Zosima gives this very interesting answer here. He says, one cannot prove anything, but it is possible to be convinced. And I think so often we're looking for the science of something. We're looking for the facts. Give me the apologetic. Give me the proof text. Give me the thing that removes doubt, right? And he's saying you can't prove it, but you can be convinced. Well, her question, of course, is how? By what? And this is what he says, and this is just kind of really amazingly transcendental for me. He says, by the experience of active love. Try to love your neighbors actively and tirelessly. The more you succeed in loving, the more you'll be convinced of God and the immortality of your soul. And if you reach complete selflessness in the love of your neighbor, then undoubtedly you will believe, and no doubt will even be able to enter your soul. This has been tested. It is certain. And, I think we all, whatever our belief system is, we find those moments where we wish we had more certainty, more knowing, more absoluteness about the tenuous and almost painful uncertainty of being a human on earth, especially now. But this is the answer, I believe, this trying to love others actively and tirelessly. And if you reach complete selflessness, then you will have faith. So, that kind of, I think, brings that all together. If what we want is our own benefit, we see how that intersects, overlaps, or is even just organically part of the same activity of caring for others, caring for self.
So this whole conversation about care, and I think in some ways you and I have spurred each other on to good works, because I too have lost about 60 pounds in the last couple years using a variety of means and methods. And it's kind of fun how that has in some ways informed our culture here, because more people are being more intentional about drinking more water and not eating the high fructose corn syrup creamers in their coffee. And but I think this idea of the story that you shared reminds me of a story that we used in Structure and Style for Students, Year 2, Level B, about the king who was searching for what's the right time, what's the right person, and what's the right activity to do. And do you remember the story?
It's coming back to me. Go ahead.
Yes, and so the king asks his wise men, and they give him some answers that he's not satisfied with. And he then goes on a journey to find this hermit and disguises himself, but the hermit sees right through him and basically doesn't answer him. But the king sees that this hermit, this frail hermit, is digging with a shovel. And he says to the hermit, "Can I help you with that?" And he says, "Absolutely." And I don't think he says absolutely, but he basically resigns the shovel to him, and the king's digging away and digging away and digging away and digging away until finally this man comes from the woods, and he's bloody, and the hermit and the king serve this man and bandage him up and put him in the hermit's cottage.
Hut.
Right, hut. Yeah. Right. Yes, exactly. It was a hut. And then afterwards, the next morning, the man wakes up and says, "Forgive me, O king." "Well, why would I need to forgive you?" says the king. I'm butchering this story. You'll have to see it as SSS, right?
Yeah.
So the king says, "Why would you need me to forgive you?" And the wounded man says, "I am your enemy, and I was going to kill you. But I couldn't find you. You were, and then you were here. You saved my life." One of his, he got into an encounter that that hurt him, the soldier that was going to kill him. And so the king not only forgave him, but realized that he had done this man some disservice and restored his property to him that he had taken from him. And everybody goes away happy. The king says to the hermit, "But you've never answered my question." And the hermit says, "But you now know the answer. The best thing to do is the thing that's in front of you. The right time to do it is now. And the best person to serve is the person you're with." So it was like, kind of like that story is like, we just need to do that next good thing.
The next best thing.
The next best thing. And I think that's us caring for ourselves and caring for others.
Yeah.
As long as we still
should
live.
We should put the text of that story in the show notes.
We'll do
in case
that.
People want to read the original.
Yeah, and you'll see how I really butchered it. That was just from memory, but yeah, we'll do that. That's really good. So, well, thank you, Andrew. This 2-part series on culture, curriculum, and care, I hope will be something that will be meaningful to our families and teachers. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, you can subscribe to this podcast in iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, or just visit us each week at iew.com/podcast. Until then, on behalf of Andrew Pudawa and the team at IEW, I thank you for allowing us to partner with you on your journey toward better listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking.